At the end of World War II, the US possessed the most powerful and productive shipbuilding industry in the world. By the war's end, US shipyards had constructed approximately 5,500 ships, accounting for nearly 90% of global shipbuilding tonnage during the conflict. Kaiser Shipyards in Vancouver, Washington, was pumping out one Liberty ship every 5 days. This industrial capacity enabled the US Navy to become the dominant naval force globally, projecting unrivaled power to all corners of the globe for 80 years and counting. But over time, things have changed. China has caught up. Which is why the US Navy has launched a massive, ambitious modernization plan to not just restore the status quo, but ensure US naval dominance for decades to come, even in China's backyard. So let's take a closer look at what's in the plan, the thinking behind it, and some of the challenges that'll need to be overcome so it all comes together as planned. At the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, China's shipbuilding capabilities were nearly non-existent. Today, China's shipbuilding capacity is estimated to be over 200 times greater than the US's, and its navy is already larger than the US's in terms of number of hulls, if not tonnage. They're also rapidly closing the technological gap. Meanwhile, US shipbuilding has atrophied to command less than 1% of global tonnage. At this rate, the US Office of Naval Intelligence projects that within a decade, China will be operating 475 battle force ships, compared to the US Navy's projected 305 to 317, placing the US at a numerical and operational disadvantage, especially in the Western Pacific. The increasing urgency of dealing with the exponential growth in China's naval might is reflected in the Navy's budget request for the 2026 fiscal year. The Navy's request is included in the fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, which passed through both the US Senate and Congress in December 2025. The Navy's funding request includes its most ambitious shipbuilding push in years, and the types of ships it wants to build reflect its changing priorities. In 2024, the Navy asked Congress for funding to build 9 ships. In 2025, it was just 6. In 2026, however, it wants to build 19 new hulls. Taken together, it's the single largest request for new ships in 25 years. The cost of these new ships? A cool $47.3 billion. But that's only 16% of the Navy's overall budget request of $292.2 billion. The ships include 1 Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine, 2 Virginia-class attack submarines, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, 1 San Antonio-class amphibious transport dock, 1 America-class amphibious assault ship, 9 medium landing ships, 2 John Lewis-class replenishment oilers, and 1 Impeccable-class ocean surveillance ship. What's noticeably missing from the request are any of the new Constellation-class frigates that are featured in the Navy's recent requests. Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, announced in November that the program had been scrapped, abruptly halting construction on 4 of the 6 planned ships after only 2 vessels, the USS Constellation and the USS Congress, had begun being constructed. The US hasn't actually built a new hull from scratch since the 1960s, and the Constellation class was no different. It was meant to be a relatively straightforward and cost-effective job, modifying a standardized, tried and tested Italian frame-based design. However, after significant delays and cost overruns, in no small part due to extensive design changes that transformed the original design into a nearly unrecognizable vessel with only 15% commonality to its European parent, cancellation is probably the prudent thing to have done. This is especially true since the Navy plans to accelerate fleet modernization by redirecting the unspent funds from the Constellation program towards new classes of faster-to-build, more readily producible warships such as unmanned surface combatants. Also missing from the shipbuilding plan is the ongoing Ford-class aircraft carrier program. However, the NDAA does provide incremental funding authority for the Navy to buy both the next 2 Ford-class aircraft carriers, along with a total of 5 Columbia-class ballistic missile submarines. The Secretary of the Navy may enter into one or more contracts for advanced procurement, advanced construction, and material and equipment in economic order quantities associated with the procurement of the Ford-class aircraft carriers, the document says. Executives from Newport News Shipbuilding, the yard where the carriers are being built, say that the block buy approach saves the Navy money by buying materials ahead of time and keeps the supply chain healthy with an ample amount of work. The multi-billion-dollar advance order is, of course, highly unlikely to hurt parent company Huntington Ingalls Industries' share price, or said executives' chances of a substantial bonus as a result. For the submarines, the NDAA says that the Navy could ink a contract to buy all 5 Columbia-class boats in fiscal year 2026, with the first intended for delivery in 2028. Also included in the request is $989 million in funding for the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, which focuses on modernizing the Navy's 4 shipyards in Norfolk, Virginia, Portsmouth, Maine, Puget Sound, Washington, and Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. These shipyards are on average over 80 years old, with their dry docks in some cases decades older. This presents one of the major challenges that will have to be overcome for the plan to succeed, as we shall see a little later on. Additionally, $16.2 billion is allocated for ship maintenance and $7.3 billion for ship operations, highlighting just how large a commitment is required to run a Navy that spans the globe. But there's a lot more to a Navy than just ships, especially a behemoth like the US Navy. As powerful as they are, many of the US's hulls are primarily a platform for delivery of advanced weaponry, marines, and other ground forces, and the US's unrivaled air power. In fact, closer integration between these various elements and other components of the US military at large is a major part of the strategic thinking behind the Navy's modernization plan. In any event, in addition to the massive spend on new ships, the NDAA also approves $17 billion for Navy aviation procurement, $5.8 billion for Navy weapons procurement, and $3.8 billion for Marine Corps procurement. In terms of aircraft, the Navy's order includes 10 F-35C Lightning II fighters, the carrier-capable variant of the 5th-generation fighter, adding to its current inventory of 60. It also includes 15 MH-60RS Seahawk helicopters, which will bring the total to 235, and another 2 CH-53K King Stallion heavy-lift helicopters, which are still in early development, to add to its existing fleet of 10. 4 new E-2D Advanced Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft will supplement the 30 the Navy already has, while 6 new MQ-25A Stingray unmanned aerial tankers, for which a serial production line is still being established, will double its existing fleet. The MQ-25 Stingray is the Navy's lead attempt to operationally deploy fixed-wing UAVs for catapult launch from its super carriers, with a planned total order of 67 operational and 9 testing aircraft. It addresses a pressing need for a more efficient aerial refueling solution than currently exists. Unfortunately, the program has fallen years behind schedule, causing component obsolescence problems that have contributed to a 65% increase in projected unit cost to $209 million. However, if the MQ-25 can be successfully integrated into carrier air wings, it has the potential for adaptation to diverse additional roles, such as carrying LRASM anti-ship missiles. Rounding the aviation order off are 6 new T-45C Goshawk trainer aircraft to add to the Navy's existing 150. In terms of weaponry, the Navy plans to procure major weapons systems in 2026, including 280 Tomahawk cruise missiles, over 1,000 Joint Direct Attack Munitions or JDAMs, 200 AGM-88G Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missiles, 150 AIM-174B long-range air-to-air missiles, 100 naval strike missiles for surface ships, 60 SM-6 Block IB interceptors, and 500 APKWS laser-guided rockets. The budget also includes upgrades to the Aegis combat systems on its destroyers and cruisers. Now, these purchases replenish some of the stockpiles expended during the US's operations in the Red Sea in support of Israel during 2024 and 2025, while enhancing overall fleet lethality, electronic warfare, and air and missile defense capabilities. Now, any military modernization plan in the current age would be disingenuous if it didn't include integration of unmanned systems, especially in the naval and aerial context. As the war in Ukraine and the 12-day war between Israel and the US and Iran have demonstrated, drones have completely reshaped the way war is fought, especially in the air and at sea. In the naval context, Ukraine's cheap but deadly sea drones have wreaked havoc on Russia's Black Sea Fleet and shadow oil tanker fleet, even as far as afield as the Mediterranean Sea. For the US Navy, unmanned vessels promise to radically shrink and cost-optimize the whole idea of a fighting vessel if they can be built and fielded in quantity. The Navy's 2026 budget includes $5.3 billion for unmanned systems, a roughly 70% increase compared to 2025's budget. The amount includes $1.7 billion towards autonomous unmanned surface vessels, or USVs, $1.2 billion towards software, and $734 million towards unmanned underwater vessels, or UUVs, to enhance fleet reach and reduce crewed vessel risk. The budget includes funds for the purchase of 12 medium unmanned surface vehicles, or MUSVs, and 6 large unmanned surface vehicles, or LUSVs. Upgrades to the Common Unmanned Surface Vehicle, or CUSV, for mine countermeasures, additional Barracuda Large Displacement UUVs, or LDUUVs, for undersea surveillance, and autonomous mine hunting systems like the AN/AQS-20C and Mk-18 MOD-2 Kingfish UUV are also included. There's also $58 million for the development of Carrier-Based Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCAs, otherwise known as wingman drones. In September, it was revealed that contracts had been issued to Anduril, Boeing, General Atomics, and Northrop Grumman requesting proposals for carrier-based CCAs. A 5th contract was subsequently awarded to Lockheed for its MD-CX autonomy platform. Perhaps more importantly, in addition to this massive spend on unmanned systems, a new office consolidating the development and purchasing of autonomous systems into a single entity has recently been established. The Portfolio Acquisition Executive Robotic Autonomous System, or PAE-RAS, will absorb the development of up to 66 programs across 18 different offices under a single acquisition professional, who would report directly to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development and Acquisition. The PAE will oversee programs that range from the XL Unmanned Underwater Vehicle Program to the emerging Modular Attack Surface Craft and the planned new Swarming Small Unmanned Surface System. Altogether, the PAE will be responsible for about $19 billion in acquisitions across the various programs over the next 5 years. Although none are expected to be ready within 2026, Congress has set aside $2.1 billion for what's become known as the MASC program, the Navy's effort to build an unmanned vessel that would act as an adjunct magazine and a sensor platform for manned ships. The MASC will supersede the previous large and medium unmanned surface vehicle programs and will notionally carry 2 40-foot shipping containers and cruise at a sailing speed of 25 knots, approximately 25 miles per hour, for up to 2,500 nautical miles. With 75 kilowatt-hours of electrical consumption, the MASC could, for example, carry 8 SM-6 missiles. There's also $113 million to procure 1 Orca, supplemented by $21.5 million for research and development. Boeing's Orca XL UUV is intended to be the Navy's first large submarine drone. It's a 50-ton hybrid propulsion UUV that can endure underwater for months, has a range of nearly 7,500 miles, and can carry 8-ton payloads. Perhaps 2026 will finally be the year when it finally hits the water. The Orca program is years behind schedule due to supplier issues and technical challenges around autonomy, battery life, and navigation. Other large displacement UUV programs and solicitations include Ocean Explorer for long-endurance missions with modular payloads, the DIU's Combat Autonomous Maritime Platform for combat-capable UUVs armed with heavyweight torpedoes, and DARPA Northrop Grumman's Large Manta Ray UUV. The Navy also requested $50 million for Project Liberator, a program to develop a containerized undersea launcher for heavyweight torpedoes, probably meant for use with its larger USVs and UUVs. All told, in addition to all the hardware, in 2026, the Navy is seeking $2.7 billion for science and technology programs, which cover research and development. The R&D fund includes $312 million for design and development of the Columbia-class submarine, including development of nuclear propulsion systems. A further $623 million is envisaged for the development of the future attack submarine to counter emerging threats by adversaries. Notably, the 2026 plan also prioritizes readiness, warfighter culture, and quality of life, with an across-the-board 3.8% military pay raise and over $1 billion invested in education and training programs. It extends the in-home childcare pilot, which provides families at select locations with fee assistance to help offset the cost of in-home childcare services through 2029. The bill also establishes a pilot program to increase payments for childcare services in high-cost locations. In terms of education, the Department of Defense Education Activity, or DODEA, will be allowed to establish a dual enrollment program with an institution of higher learning, allowing students at DODEA schools to enroll in college-level classes and earn credit at no cost. Local school districts serving large numbers of military-connected children will also continue to receive impact aid through DoD, with $50 million in DoD impact aid and another $20 million for school districts serving military children with severe disabilities authorized. In terms of housing, the budget funds 3 construction projects for family housing, along with improvement efforts for the revitalization of existing homes, maintenance of around 8,650 government-owned units and 1,650 leased units, and planning and design activities to support projects primarily in Guam and Japan. As you can see, close to $300 billion in Navy spending buys a comprehensive and far-reaching set of capabilities and is likely to outpace China's expenditure in 2026, if not its naval output. Taking into account off-budget spending, China's defense budget is estimated to be between $330 and $450 billion, with some US lawmakers speculating the total could reach $700 billion. With Navy expenses estimated to be 25 to 30% of the total defense spend, the US Navy's expenditure could exceed China's by 1 to 3 times. More importantly, the US Navy's 2026 plan reflects an emphasis on speed and agility to bridge the gap with China's lead both in hull output and implementation of ultra-modern systems. As Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of War, points out, the massive spending is not just about applying what fellow YouTube channel Cappy Army calls TOAMP, throwing obscene amounts of money at the problem. Speed to delivery is now our organizing principle, he said in November, adding, "If our warfighters die or a country loses because we took too long to get them what we needed, we failed. It's that simple. The sense of urgency has slipped too much, and when you look at what we face, we have to recapture it." Indeed, the entire budget is designed to support the interim National Defense Strategic Guidance implemented by President Donald Trump to restore peace through strength in the face of threats. According to Hegseth, the aim is to restore the warrior ethos in the US military, rebuild the military, and re-establish deterrence. Navy Secretary Phelan developed 3 priorities to shape the Navy in line with this vision: strengthening shipbuilding and the maritime industrial base, fostering an adaptive, accountable, and innovative warfighter culture, and improving the health, welfare, and training of our people and their families. In light of this, the Navy intends to rebuild, reform, and refocus on what really matters: readiness, accountability, and deterrence. There are 2 major arcs to this strategy. The navigation plan for America's warfighting Navy prioritizes capabilities and enablers that raise the Navy's baseline level of readiness to respond in competition, crisis, and conflict. And the CMC's planning guidance core purpose is to deter conflict and, when deterrence fails, to defeat the US's enemies in battle. On the face of it, the budget appears to tick all these boxes and then some. By the end of 2026, the Navy should be fielding a deployable battle force of 287 ships, including 115 surface combatants, 63 submarines, 36 support ships, 31 combat logistics, 31 amphibious, and 11 aircraft carriers. That's a decrease of 9 ships compared to the 2025 fleet, reflecting the prioritization of quality and operational readiness over sheer numbers. The strategy is to replace aging vessels with advanced platforms that align better with the demands of high-end conflict, particularly in the Pacific. Moreover, the new procurement plan's focus on amphibious and logistical platforms is a direct response to rising operational challenges in the Middle East and Latin America, geared at facilitating swift responses to regional crises and supporting sustained forward operations. Boosting the modernization effort, vast sums are provided for R&D investment in developing and deploying future capabilities for all types of conflict. That includes nuclear cruise missiles, modernization of the TACAMO strategic communication system that links the US National Command Authority with nuclear delivery systems, as well as unmanned vehicles and classified projects. As we've seen, there's also a range of initiatives to improve the quality of life and quality of service for the Navy's servicemen. Plus, although somewhat controversial, the 2026 plan aims to eliminate wasteful spending by reducing lower-valued programs such as DEI, climate, contract services, IT services, and workforce optimization, reinvesting the funds towards more urgent priorities. Taken together, the unprecedented investment in naval capabilities signifies much more than the US's ability to outspend its rivals by orders of magnitude. It marks a strategic shift in the US maritime posture, delivering a clear message to both allies and adversaries. The US is investing heavily in its naval strength to safeguard its interests and uphold its hegemony. Still, there are many who question whether the US will be able to overcome significant, possibly overwhelming challenges in order to pull the plan off. Despite the ambitious goals of Trump's shipyard infrastructure optimization program, the US only produced 3 new hulls in 2025. The coordinated surge across regulations, trade, investment, workforce training, and industrial capacity to reverse decades of decline is clearly making a difference. But is it realistic to expect the US's decrepit shipyards to scale up more than 6 times within a year to deliver 19? It seems optimistic, to put it mildly. Another major issue is finding and retaining the thousands of qualified workmen who will be required to scale up production. The Navy and the shipbuilding industry in the US in general has long been suffering from an acute shortage of skilled manpower, especially in crucial positions like master welders, pipe fitters, and electricians. You can print money to pay them, but you can't just print welders and steel workers. There's already a shortage of these workers in the US, and unhealthy competition from other industries, particularly the booming AI data center development industry, only narrows the field. Dramatically improving salaries and benefits is one way of dealing with this issue. Importing labor, or even outsourcing some of the shipbuilding to shipbuilding giant allies like Japan and South Korea, are other options. However, there are drawbacks to the latter approaches. Outsourcing shipbuilding will hamper the US's efforts to build up its own workforce, while employing foreign workers risks security breaches. These issues have contributed to a situation where significant delays and cost overruns have come to characterize the Navy's shipbuilding programs. According to a 2025 Government Accountability Office report, nearly every major program, including Virginia-class submarines and Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, is now years behind schedule. Time will tell whether the Navy's new procurement policies, which focus on unmanned vehicles and distributed force and more unified enabling structures, will turn the tide for the sleeping giant of US naval production. Or if hundreds of billions of dollars will again primarily enrich the military-industrial complex, while US shipbuilding flounders and China forges ahead. We'll of course be keeping up with all the latest developments So make sure you subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so you don't miss out on any of it. Thanks for watching.